Hi, this is the New Mind podcast. Today's guest is Jeremy Indika, who is here to talk about his history of sexual abuse, but also the work that he does in this area. Now, it's a really interesting episode for me because there's lots of different layers as to why someone like Jeremy may not choose to speak out, and it's very important that he does. And I know that for a lot of you, this is going to be a difficult episode to listen to. You might feel triggered at some point during the process. If you do, just stop, take a pause, but please do come back because we're going to cover some really important subjects. But obviously, this is a storytelling podcast. We all know that now. And the reason that I do it this way is because I want you to feel connected to the story, and I want you to feel like you're part of a community that really matters, that really cares, which brings me neatly on to introducing you, Jeremy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, I said just there about the community aspect and the connection because you've created something very similar, and I know it's really important to you as well. So normally, actually, and I think I even said this to you, I would start off with your early childhood stuff. But before we go there, just tell us a little bit about the community that you've created so that we can make sure we do cover that properly.
Amazing. So I launched a platform called Something to Say. And the reason why I launched that was because I got so much confidence through sharing my own story.
Yes.
I thought, why not give others the space to do so too? And I worked with a brilliant designer called Naria, who we got a logo going and some branding going. And we just started inviting people to share their stories on that platform. So of course some submissions came in, people started reading them, sharing them, and then more people started sharing, and then the community just grew. And then me and Kaz, who I work with on this work, we decided, well, let's try to get a bit more variety in the platform. So it's not just people's stories every time, even though that's incredibly powerful. There are going to be some people where that becomes a bit too much for them too. And also we want information on there is what we decided. So people started submitting articles. People started submitting their poetry, artwork.
I love that.
It's just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's actually a community-driven page. Everything that we post on there is created by the community. And we've just launched some clothing, some hoodies and some t-shirts off the back of it. We've just launched a podcast. We've just launched a YouTube channel. So it is an incredible, loving, inspiring community full of strength and courage. And that was always my aim.
Do you know why that's so important? Is that I remember years ago, and people know my story by now, but there was nothing out there. There was no therapy. There was no nothing. And when the internet first launched, which I think the first time I used it, I was 22. Right. And so it's like, I think, how old am I now? So 23 years ago was the first time I used the internet. And one of the things that I found strength in the internet was poetry, survivors poetry, because I'd never met anyone like me before. No one spoke the way they do, and people weren't telling their stories because of shame and all those sorts of things. It just wasn't culturally the norm, was it? And I remember seeing something that Tori Amos, the singer Tori Amos, yes, she's got some sort of history of sexual abuse. And I think she did a poem or a song or something like that. And it was through reading other people's poetry that I was like, God, I really feel like I'm, in the depths of despair. I'm not the only one. I'm not on my own. Someone else is literally getting me and I'm getting them. And so what you're doing, I know from having needed that myself, is so powerful.
But it's so common. It's so common that people write that to us as well, just through reading other people's stories. They may never want to share their story. They may have never told anybody that, and they don't intend to, and that's fine.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But just to read other people's stories, we pose a lot of questions on there as well, like what inspired you. Have you got your favorite book that you could recommend to the community? Like, there's just so much going on there.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's just so powerful for people to hear. And also because I kicked it off from a place of strength and courage, that's really my thing. It's actually continued with the people that are writing their story. So they're actually writing it from a position of strength and courage.
Yes.
Right. Because when I started researching this topic after coming to terms with what happened to me in my childhood, what I noticed was it's overwhelmingly sadness and sorrow.
Yes, it is. You're right. Yeah.
And rightly so, because it is sad. But I also would love to inject a bit of strength and courage into the conversation. And hope, because that will give people hope.
Yes, so true.
Right?
That is when you connect to someone else and you see that they're further on in the journey than you are, it gives you hope.
Hope is
doesn't
a
it?
great word to use.
Yeah,
And I always think about the young teenagers who are looking to us elders for direction.
Yeah.
Right. And what kind of example are we going to set? If we're 100% going to talk about it with sadness and sorrow, where's that going to lead them? Right, down that path.
Yeah.
And I think it's necessary to have that path, but it's also necessary to have various paths.
You have to have it all. You can't have a darkness without the light, and vice versa.
Right. So that's what I'm pursuing.
Wow. I mean, that gives an inroad into your story.
Yeah.
So let's go all the way back to get back to where we are now.
Yeah.
So tell me about growing up for you. By the way, before you start telling this, I really want to hook this in because you told me some fascinating stuff about what you've left behind.
Yeah.
So, I just want to reiterate how passionate you are about this.
Yeah.
Okay, so off you go.
So let's start it at 8 years old.
Okay.
So what kind of child was I? I was energetic, outgoing, confident, throwing a few jokes out in class, nice set of friends. And I would say an average kind of young kid, but nothing like untoward.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents have recently separated. They've just been through a divorce. So
How was that?
It's so funny you asked me that question because I was sitting for dinner with my close mates the other day, and I'm 38 years old. So if you are separating and the children are questioning what that means, and somebody passed the comment of they'll get used to it or they'll understand later, and I felt like that was a complete misunderstanding of how a child can look at divorce of their parents, which are like their strongest unit in their world. And I look back at it and I think it definitely affected me. Right. And we know that life unfolds and relationships break, and that's kind of the process in some situations, but it definitely affects children.
Yeah, it does. I think it's almost throwaway now. Like, they'll be fine. Children are so resilient.
I don't know. I find lots of resistance with that throwaway attitude.
Yeah, because every child's different for a start.
Absolutely.
How can you know that all children are resilient?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a nice thing for us to think
makes it a bit easier.
Yeah.
And for those people that have separated, by the way, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty by saying that, but I just want to also say from the child's point of view,
we're talking from the child's point of view,
is to be more mindful of that as well, and not just to think. And I don't think people that separate do think that. I think they see the impact of their children. I think they know, but I think it's almost people around us. People, friends, they don't want us to feel bad about our decisions, so they'll say, "Oh, don't worry about it; they'll be fine."
Yes, and it is important for us to say we're not knocking anybody down who separates. Life is life, and sometimes that separation, which in my parents' situation, from my point of view, was the correct decision.
Yes, but it didn't stop it from being impactful at the time.
That's how we should summarize that.
But did it make you a bit more vulnerable? Do you think?
I think for sure, because now instead of two parents' eyes on the child in all situations, you've got two separated people
who are hurting as well,
who are
going through their own stuff,
who now are trying to look after children and are now going to need outside care, possibly. Right. So you are in a more vulnerable situation. Because before you're a unit of two, looking after the child, protecting the child. Now you are not a unit of two.
It changes the dynamic.
It does change.
Does it lead to self-abandonment for you as well at that point before anything else happens? Are you questioning whether you were good enough for them to stay together, or did you not have that experience?
I mean, I'm going to say I could have gone through various thought patterns, but due to being 8 years old, I can't remember any of them.
Which is okay. That's fair. Yeah.
I can't remember everything. Now, if I sat down with a therapist, I'm sure we could unpick certain parts of my personality now that have been driven from that event. But at the time, thinking as the 8-year-old Jeremy, I can't really remember.
It just wasn't very nice.
Just not confusing.
Yeah.
What happens here though? But they are a unit.
Yeah. I get that. Mean? It's like your house suddenly changing.
Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah.
What do you mean they're not living together anymore? So then I ended up spending some time at my mum's and some time at my dad's.
So you're not grounded anymore, not rooted.
The stability is a bit unsettled, but my parents tried. They did everything that they could to try to make that stable, right? So we would have an arrangement, like many people do now, coming from divorced parents, which I think is the majority, maybe.
Yeah.
And there was some stability there.
Yeah.
So sometime at my mum, sometime at my dad's. Now, my dad was a doctor.
Okay.
So his work life was very demanding.
Yeah.
Had to stay at the surgery, seeing patients late, unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Have to be on call sometimes at night.
Yeah.
So we needed somebody else in the house to help with childcare.
Okay.
Now, he knew a nurse from his hospital. This was a male nurse from Sri Lanka, where my family are from, around my dad's age. And he had recently come to the country. I'm guessing that actually. That is just something I'm not sure of.
Yeah.
But he was from Sri Lanka. And my dad must have had some kind of connection with him.
Yeah.
You know, they were probably mates.
Yeah.
And as far as the story goes that I know, he needed some help with accommodation. And so he'd come and stay around ours now and again. Now, this is when things started.
Yeah.
So he must have been, in fact, I found out a bit more details recently. He was 35 years old at this point.
Right. Okay.
I was 8 years old.
Right.
So he's not a few years, he's just a few years younger than me. I'm 38. And so when I think about that, I think that's me though. Like, how would you even start thinking about doing something to a young boy? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, kind of puts it in reality for me.
It does when you start putting yourself, time moves on and now you are that age that he would have done that.
Yeah. And quite interestingly, now I see children who are 8 years old.
Doesn't that just blow your mind?
That's a big thing.
That can be a trigger.
That is. I think it is one of my triggers.
Because you realise how, well, you were a baby.
How childlike you are.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you're so not in control of anything.
You are just still a child and your body is so childlike.
Yeah. Especially boys. I mean, some girls obviously develop quicker than boys, but even boys, into their puberty still look very small and boy-like, don't they?
No shoulders. No, there's no sexual nature there at all.
No.
So he started coming round and staying round and helping out my dad, right? And that's when he started taking a liking to me. Now, how this evolved, I got no clue, right? People ask me, well, what was the grooming process? What was his technique? What did he do? And I don't know, because it crept up on me, right? All I know is the things we were doing.
Yes.
So the final is almost like in that process of him meeting me, to the most extreme sexual abuse situations that were going on.
Yeah.
I know about that segment.
Yeah, you don't know the rest.
I don't know the rest.
And maybe because it was so subtle that you would never have picked up on it. No one was picking up on it.
It's the sophisticated grooming process.
But it's not always the obvious that you see in the movies or read in the papers.
I mean, it's reported mostly inaccurately in the media.
Yeah.
Like, of course, the grooming process needs to be slow, steady, not alarming, not hurtful, not painful, not shocking. Of course, it needs to be like that because he needs to get me to the end stage.
And also, it depends on what type of personality the person has. Because if you think about a more grandiose kind of narcissistic person, looking back retrospectively, you might say, well, it was obvious, they were pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. But if someone's more introverted, more covert in their approach, more experienced in their approach, it's not always detectable. And this is why we've got to look at the child sometimes and their behaviour, not the adults around them. Because if the child's behaviour is changing, then we start to go, hang on, when did that start to happen? Because it's not always obvious.
Right. And I'm not sure about if I was changing during this process too. And I don't think anyone can give me the answer to that. No,
because if they could, they would have been more aware of it at the time.
And there was nothing alarming going on. I continued as that boy, and he then got me to the bits that I can remember, right?
Yeah.
I've got like 8 video snippets in my head of the favourite things that he used to like to do with me.
Yeah.
But whatever he did do, whatever grooming process he implemented, which I'd love to find out one day, right? Because one of my things that I'd love to happen is to interview him and him not be able to lie.
Oh my God, that's powerful.
I'd love to be able to do that.
Yeah.
That would give me so much rest.
I get it, because I've kind of had not major conversations with my dad, but tiny bits of conversation, and I've wanted, and with my mum, and she won't let me go any further. And my dad I don't think he could bring himself to go further, but I would love to do that, because if I can understand, it really is part of the letting go. So I do understand that. I know that might be
100%.
shocking to people that haven't been through it, but both of us have, and both of us feel the same.
It's like, who's got all the valuable information?
The answers.
It's the people that are doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
We can spend decades trying to piece this puzzle together. They've got the puzzle and it's completed.
Yeah. Right? But the thing is, again, if they are narcissists, they don't want to give that to you. Right. That's their little bit of power. Right. So they probably would never give you the answers anyway.
Of course. That's why I'd like to put him under a lie detector.
He cannot lie.
That kind of situation.
You're curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I'd like to know what happens so that we can educate for the future.
It's so important.
Yeah. Because we're trying to prevent this crime from happening to future generations.
Yeah.
So he managed to get me to a stage where we were doing things completely naked and I wasn't questioning a thing.
Yeah. How did you feel at the time? Were you aware that you didn't like it, or were you so conditioned by that point that it was just playtime?
Now the confusing thing for some of the listeners is going to be I like some of it.
Yeah. And it's the story that we hear again and again and again. And I'm so pleased you've said that, because it's not easy to say out loud.
So let's take things like the fondling.
Yeah.
Right. So when he's fondling me, it's giving me a warm, tingly sensation downstairs. Yeah. Now, I'm not of the age of puberty. I'm 8 years old. Right. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I couldn't get an erection.
Yeah.
But whatever he's doing down there is like a cuddle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are lots of, I read this somewhere before, so please don't quote me on this, but I believe there's thousands of nerve endings down there for a boy.
100%.
So they can't not feel the pleasure.
100%.
Yeah.
And when you're 8 years old in 1993, right?
Yeah.
Different era back then.
Yeah.
There's no pants rule being taught in schools.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no body awareness lessons in schools.
No, there isn't. There's nothing.
There's no conversations anywhere.
No.
There's no YouTube or internet or films that are talking about any of these types of things.
No, there's no podcasts.
There's no podcast.
You can't listen, you can't learn anywhere.
Right. Now, I know I was 8 years old, but 8-year-olds are now getting taught in schools about certain things.
Yeah.
Right. So I had none of that.
Yeah.
So I couldn't determine that what I was involved in was something I needed to tell somebody about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going up to his room, the room he was staying in, the spare room, or my room, when my dad's at work or he's late home. And he probably is creating this as some kind of game.
Yes, I would imagine.
Right? And then he's probably saying to me, let me do these things. Let's do these things again. You're a special boy. You let me do these things.
Yeah.
And he's making me feel warm and tingly.
Yeah.
And we're all right.
It's just like, is it for you at that point like an extension of like bath time, where you're in the water, it feels lovely on your skin, you're playing around?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really described it like that, but it's that playful. It is like, if you can think back to those times in your childhood, it was this playful thing, but also I thought he was cool.
Right, so he was like a bit of a hero.
Yeah, he's
a bit
like
of an idol.
Cool older boy. Now, I thought he was an older boy. Now, in all of these years since talking about this, I always thought he was 25.
Oh, wow.
But it was only 2 weeks ago that I found out he was 35.
So he obviously looked younger, did he?
He must have looked younger.
Yeah.
But at 8 years old, you don't know.
No, you can't tell the difference.
You know what I mean?
All I remember at that age is thinking that everyone was really old.
Yeah.
But he must have looked
He must have looked like an older cousin.
Yeah, I bet he did. Yeah.
And I thought he was cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Now, things start to get darker when we start to think about the more explicit things, right?
Yeah.
The harder stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So we had the kissing that he taught me how to do. I'm not sure how I felt about that, but I always remember his beard scratching me.
Yes, you remember that sense.
Yeah, but I mean, he must have geared it up to me as like, this is a special thing that we do.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the fondling, anything that I was receiving on my body was okay.
Yeah.
It's not painful, right?
Yeah.
It's not uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. And I've got no way of telling that this is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started with the oral sex. So when he would put my penis in his mouth, super warm.
Yeah.
Super warm.
Yeah.
Not weird yet. It started to get weird when he started training me to do things to him.
So now you're aware of, this is not what I normally do.
Not even that. This feels gross.
Oh, it's horrible.
Right.
So you've just got that automatic, ugh.
And that's really interesting, right? Because I've got no knowledge or tools or understanding to know that.
You just
but
know.
Something in my instinct.
Yeah.
As a human being.
Yeah.
So maybe we could say from that every child has got an instinct, right? This doesn't feel right.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that does fit in with that kind of, and I'm saying it like this for the listeners that have never been sexually abused, that may not really know many people that have, or if they do know people, they haven't spoken about it. My experience is different because it was my dad.
Right.
So I knew that it would, and I don't know if my instinct was just like, dads definitely don't touch their daughters there. I don't know if because no one had told me that was the case, but I just knew it.
Right.
Because it was different to how it had been before.
Right.
So that when there was that, again, he was just my dad, and then it moved into my dad touching me in places and again kissing, tongues, that sort of thing. That's not that is different to what happened before, and I don't like it.
Right.
I knew that very, 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 very straight away. But for other people where it's a trusted person and not a family member, if we use that bath playtime thing, the child is naked up until maybe 7 or 8, 9, 10 years old, with parents around seeing their naked body. They're naked in the water, and the water is moving over parts of their body that feel warm and fuzzy. And if that adult that's doing those things to you at 8 years old and you've got no concept, it's doing it in a way where it makes it feel like playful bath time.
Yeah.
You could understand that the child has not yet made any connection to anything being wrong, but the instinct for you kicks in at the moment he's training you to do things to him. Immediate instinct.
Immediate.
Right.
Feeling of gross, feeling of uncomfortable, feeling of I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But I'm hooked in that by that point.
Yeah.
Meaning I'm just in the situation.
Yeah.
Right? And
you're conditioned.
I'm programmed.
Yeah.
I'm programmed for this to be normal and this just be part of it, you know.
And also children self-abandon. They will abandon themselves to do what the adult tells them to
right,
do.
Okay.
That's it's not just that you're conditioned, it's that children generally won't say no to safe adults, to trusted people.
And especially if he has programmed me in this way.
Correct. So you've got a double whammy there.
Yeah. And it's then when I think, why in those moments didn't you tell anybody? You know, because it's gross, it's disgusting, it's uncomfortable. There's an alarm there somewhere.
And you feel it, not just in your head. I could feel that response.
The body is telling me. But I didn't.
No, neither did I. And that's the I always say, just give context right here. Prefrontal cortex starts to fuse, this part of your brain, at 7.
Right.
It doesn't fully fuse, generally till 21, can be 25, sometimes even a bit later. At 8 years old, your brain has only just started fusion. So there's a lack of analysis, there's a lack of logic, there's a lack of decision making, and there's a lack of emotional regulation.
Right.
So you don't have the tools yet to be able to piece it all together to know what to do. No one's taught you. If someone touches you here, you tell someone. If your brain isn't naturally analysing, being logical and doing the decision-making bit yet, because it can't, remember, the brain is like a photo that gets developed. Not the ones you take on your phone that are instant, but the old school ones where you'd have to go to a dark room and you'd watch the photo develop like a Polaroid picture. And if it takes till 21, let's say, for it to be fully developed, it means it's developing. Whilst it's developing, it's learning. And if someone's not teaching you, you're not learning.
Right.
So although the alarm goes off, you don't actually know what to do about it. That's why children are so vulnerable to this.
Right.
Whereas an adult being sexually assaulted, although it's horrific and wrong and disgusting and awful, they have got the benefit of hindsight, of wisdom, of knowledge, of analysis, of decision making, of logic. That doesn't mean it's an easy decision to make, and sometimes they never make that decision to say anything. But children don't even have that.
Right. I think it's so important what you're saying, to give your average person who's never even heard a conversation about this before.
Yeah.
Like everybody knows that it's going on, right? Behind closed doors,
yes.
but many haven't like gone to any level with the conversation. I think what you're saying is just so important to give people an idea of how a child's brain works,
Yeah.
because you know it's so confusing for people. Why don't you say
I
something?
know, and it's the question that I used to get asked all the time, and I used to want to say this: could you please just fuck off? If it was that simple, I would have said something.
Yeah, of course.
And now I can explain it.
Of course.
Yeah, and now I can explain it, and I've got that understanding, that knowledge. But at the time when people were asking, I was like, why would you ask me that question? And even then I knew it was such a stupid question to ask. But equally, I don't mean to put anyone down that's ever asked that question, but I know it comes from a place of just like, how could this happen to you?
Right.
Why wouldn't you say?
Right.
But of course they're an adult when they're asking, or at least a teenager, you know, who might have a bit more complex thinking.
And those kind of questions which will always invoke some immediate reaction inside of me, I always remind myself that isn't actually that person's fault.
No, it's not.
It's just a lack of understanding.
It really is,
Because there's no conversation around this.
Yes.
Right?
Especially not from the male perspective.
Absolutely. Now, when I go and do these talks, and in particular in schools most recently, I did one last week to teachers. One of the ways I try to explain this concept that we're talking about is the concept of the grooming process and a child's brain, and trying to put the audience back in that child's brain.
Yeah.
I use the analogy of Father Christmas.
Right? Good one.
So I say, and before I start this, I always say, I've got nothing against the story of Father Christmas, right? I think it's truly magical.
Yeah.
Great part of childhood. I mean, we've just had Christmas. It's great, right?
Yeah.
But look what happens. The story is of a man on a sleigh led by flying reindeer, delivering a present to every house all in one night. Like, that story couldn't be further from reality. Yeah. But told year on year, the children truly believe it.
Yeah, they do. They do.
They think it's real.
They don't question it.
They don't question it, right? And then look what happens in the month of December. You can start to control their behavior through the story, right? If you do this, if you don't do that, Father Christmas won't come. And they are on it.
Yeah, they are. They trust everything you say.
Absolutely.
Especially their parents.
Especially. Yeah. And you create this world around them that they think is normal.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we all remember Christmases, even whether you had the Father Christmas story in your childhood or not, you understand that concept. And then you can start to really understand, using a relatable example, how malleable a child's brain is. Then you can start to understand a bit more about the grooming process.
And most kids, unless they've got older brothers and sisters, don't really start to question Father Christmas until 8, 9.
Right. And interestingly, when you tell the child that Father Christmas is not real, the belief is completely gone.
Yes.
Yeah. There's nothing in between.
Yeah.
And you can never regain that story again.
No.
Right? You can't tell them it's not real and then a year later start to tell them it's real and they believe it. Right. So that's one of my big things about, like, when you tell children about the private areas, they know.
Yeah.
Right. So they can't get caught out by any story or grooming process.
Yeah. You're right. It's a very good point. And I always say that about the prefrontal. I always say children believe in Father Christmas and fairies because they've got no way of analysing the information, but it also leaves them very vulnerable to other people that are going to also put things into their head.
Yeah.
So that gives a real good bit of context between the two of us of why you wouldn't have said anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, how long was it before obviously this became more and more gratuitous and more and more damaging over time. At what point did you feel like this is something I can't do anymore, or did it stop because of him? How did it come to its final end?
No, I'm still investigating the story,
right?
And actually investigating the details has become very hard due to an incident a year and a half ago, which I'll get to a bit later on in the story. But my current knowledge is that he got another job and moved away.
Right. So actually you never got to that point where you said
no.
So it could have gone on for longer if he hadn't moved away.
I think it went on for 2 years.
Right.
On and off.
Yeah.
He was in and out of the house.
Yeah.
And then he'd gone.
That must have been, I was going to say devastating, but
I don't remember it. I don't remember it finishing.
That's so interesting.
I don't remember thinking, oh my God, that's finished. That's over. Where is he? I must have been so silent about it. And then I continued as the boy that I had always been, because I'd never changed in that time.
Yeah.
So at 8 years old, I'm pretty sure you're in year 4.
Yeah.
So now I'm in year 6, something like that,
yes,
right?
Yes,
it's around that.
Yeah.
And nobody's got a clue.
No one's picking up on anything. Did your behaviour change at all in subtle ways that looking back you can see now, or can you not remember?
I mean, if we had long-term video footage, maybe we could analyse it.
Yeah.
But like, I've gone back to people who knew me back in those days.
Yeah.
Right now, I've got a close group of friends, which I feel very fortunate about, which I actually met 1 year before the abuse was going on, right? At my new school, because my parents are separated. We moved town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I still know them boys now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's so cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's like 10 of us.
Wow.
So whenever we met for Christmas, there's like 10 people around the table. We always say how fortunate we are.
That is so lucky.
Right.
So fortunate.
And some of those boys met at 4. I met them at 7. They already had a little group formed.
Oh, wow.
Then we met some in year 7 at secondary school, and we're still together now.
That's really cute.
Now, I have spoke to the parents of those friends who've known me all of this time. And I say to them, now looking back at 8-year-old Jeremy, when I was around your house, when we had sleepovers and stuff, could you now see that I was showing any signs? And they all say, no, Jeremy.
You were just very good at putting it all into a box.
Our brains are so clever.
They are. The subconscious mind, 95% of our thinking. So what happens is a lot of stuff goes into the implicit storage area, which is the cerebellum. Your hippocampus only retrieves explicit memories, doesn't retrieve them all. Some of them, you won't remember learning to walk, for example. Right. You won't remember learning, you might do, but you won't remember learning to read necessarily.
Yeah, these are great points.
Yeah, so your brain will just store stuff there that it doesn't see as necessary to retrieve.
Yeah, amazing. That's so great.
And it's a protective mechanism as well.
Okay, yeah. And that's a great point about the walking and the reading thing, because that really, again, puts us back into those days and reminds us how we were, what nature we were at that age.
Yeah, you just put everything into certain boxes.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
Then I moved into my teenage years. I'm now 13, 14, having a great laugh at school. It was the birth of Jackass, right?
Oh my gosh. So I can only imagine what you got up to.
You remember how big that was?
Yeah, it was huge.
It was ginormous. So all the boys are trying to replicate what they're doing and daring each other to do stuff. And I was just having a good time. I got into sport, played sport heavily, started captaining sports teams at school, but also I started doing really well at school.
So you were performing really well. So you were not a concern to anyone.
No one was questioning anything about me.
Yeah.
Captaining the rugby team, the basketball team, the cricket team, getting top grades in school, being also very mischievous with my lads, right? So teachers weren't quite sure what box to put me in either. And like, things were so good.
So you were the exact opposite of what you would expect, is what we're saying.
Stereotypical.
Yeah.
The stereotypical thoughts from the general public of what happens to a child after sexual abuse.
You don't fit any of that.
Not really.
Which is so important. Again, there's so many reasons why it's so important for you to be here today and to do the work that you do every day. But what you've just said there is one of the most important.
It shocks people.
Yeah.
And it in particular shocks teachers when I speak to them.
I bet it does. Because they're always looking for something. Right.
The safeguarding training is the stereotypical common signs, which we shouldn't ignore.
No, we shouldn't.
But every child reacts to everything completely differently.
No one's the same.
Look at this as an example. Let's say you've got 2 parents that push you hard.
Yeah.
They only expect the top results from you, otherwise there's trouble.
Yeah.
You're going to get one child who's going to thrive in that environment. You're going to get one child who's going to resist that and rebel against it and go the complete other way.
Yeah, it's so true.
I don't think sexual abuse is too dissimilar, because for lots of people that come out and speak about it in their adult life, all the people around them are like, you're joking.
Yeah, they had no idea.
No idea.
I mean, I did exhibit signs, but again, I don't think it was
signs in hindsight, or signs of general young girl, teenager expressing themselves.
See, when it came out, I was more like that. The sort of more angry young girl. But before that, I think I don't think there was always signs, actually. It's hard, isn't it? Because your timelines get a bit
Yeah.
skew-if. I think there were I don't think I was taking care of my personal hygiene.
Right.
But then a lot of kids go through that.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think it was until it came out that I started to express more.
Right.
But I was expressing the wrong ways because I wasn't being heard.
Okay.
So I put that down to not being heard. Yes, I was abused, but it was the not being heard bit by my mother who stayed with my dad that created the biggest emotional dysregulation in me.
Yeah.
So you're probably right. Actually, at the time, you might just say, "Oh, she's not really looking after herself." But now they might pick up on that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like you say, it's too granular, this subject.
Yes.
You can't just go, well, here we go. Here's what it looks like. And if it doesn't look like that, it might look like this or this. And there we go. There's your answer. It doesn't work like that.
There's a million sides to this.
Yeah.
You know, and something that I've been thinking about more recently is I must have been showing signs somewhere. Now, was it here? Was I more promiscuous than I would have been?
Yeah, that's a good question because I know I certainly was,
Right.
but that was in teenage years. I'm
Yeah.
assuming you mean
Yeah. Now, was I felt like I was really confident with girls, right?
Yeah.
My first kiss, my first next thing, first next thing, like I was loving that.
Yeah.
I don't remember really feeling too nervous about that.
Well, you kind of
Done
knew
it before.
Yeah.
So was that a sign? Not your sign that anybody would have been able to observe.
Yeah.
But just in general behaviour.
Yeah.
Was that a sign of the past? Possibly. Or maybe I was just that way inclined because I was a very confident young man.
Yeah.
I really was.
I think I was.
Yeah.
Obviously not a young man.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, there's not more news that I need to disclose. But no, I think I was a confident young person.
Yeah.
I think I, in fact, a little bit cocky.
Yeah.
Someone might
Yeah.
say, yeah.
Yeah, I was a little bit bolshy and like.
But was that just a protector part? You know what I said to you off camera, and I will probably come back to that, where the powerful version of you comes forward to protect the victim.
Maybe.
So you get this like mask of confidence, doing well at school, being popular, being a bit naughty in other ways.
Yeah.
It could be that was the protector part.
Something I like to say, which is me putting a narrative on it, is that I went through something so horrific and come out the other side. Yeah. And I feel like I can achieve anything.
Yeah.
Like it's a nice narrative to put on it, whether that be true or not. But, you know.
I think it is true. I think if you come out of it, I think if it's personality, it's having at least one adult that hears you and supports you, at least one. It could be a teacher, it could be a neighbour, it could be someone that supports you. I think it's having a little bit of fire in your belly as well. Maybe there's a little bit of anger there, or maybe there's something, but it's a driver.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think it's also hitting rock bottom sometimes. I don't think you can avoid that for a lot of us.
Right.
Some people don't have to go there, but I certainly did.
Yeah.
Again, it's so holistic.
Right. Now, I don't think I'd hit any type of rock bottom by this point.
Okay.
In fact, I'm confident to say I hadn't.
Yeah.
Because I'd boxed this thing away.
Yeah.
And buried it deep.
It was implicit. It was not explicit. It was hidden.
Right.
It was you know when, like, for example, we've got this heater on in the background. Okay, we know it's there.
Yeah.
I don't know if the listeners will be able to hear it because it'll probably be wiped out of the sound. But we know that white sound is there. But it's only when I've just pulled it out now that you'll hear it.
Okay.
You probably weren't hearing it before because it was just there.
Oh, wow.
And I'm wondering if that's what your implicit memory storage is like.
Right. Okay. So that's really interesting because then as I moved through my teenage years and the Jimmy Savile case comes up.
Yeah.
I'm round a mate's house and somebody's got a film called The Sleepers on, which is an old school film about boys being abused in a boarding school.
I've seen this.
I have to make some kind of weird excuse and get out of there.
Yeah. So the white noise is suddenly being heard.
Oh, someone's reminding me there's a white noise in the background.
Yeah.
Now, I don't go home and think why I made that excuse to leave. I don't go home and think, why is that Jimmy Savile case making me uncomfortable? It just is making me uncomfortable. Yeah. Right? So I feel
Can I ask you something?
Please.
Sorry to interject.
Please.
Where did you feel uncomfortable in your body?
Stomach, probably.
Whereabouts in your stomach?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Would it be low down or would it be higher up towards your rib cage?
I'd be guessing. So I don't know.
You just know it's in the centre of your body.
And even saying my stomach is a bit of a guess, but let's say I come across something really triggering now? Where do I feel it? Next time I go through something like that, I'm going to think about it, and
Yeah.
I'm going to write to you and let you know,
Yeah,
because I'm
please
pretty
do.
sure, depending on where I'm feeling it, you've got
Something to say.
Yeah.
I only ever ask that question because, again, I like people to hear and know that when they feel something in their body, it's their intuition, and it's usually different parts of the body that will give you different ideas of what it is you need to pay attention to. If it's your stomach, so low down is emotional processing, then higher up the solar plexus is self-esteem. It's the fire in the belly. It's also to do with willpower. Higher up, if it rises into the chest, it starts to turn to a bit of a fight feeling.
Right.
A compression in your chest.
Right.
Your jaw might clench. And also, if your throat tightens up, it's to do with suppression of your voice.
So interesting.
So if you get trembly legs and it's lower down, it's often that you want to run. So I was just interested in where you would feel it.
Next time I get triggered or get sent off balance by something, I'm going to take notice of that.
Yeah, please.
And see where that's affecting my body.
It's really important to know, just so you know what your body's trying to tell you.
So I was going through many of those, more and more frequent. Now, let's say I'm mid-teens, late teens at this point. But life's going so well, Just left school, great grades, went to college, got good grades there too. All my mates weren't leaving my hometown. They were getting into trades, electricians, carpenters, plumbers and stuff. And there was no way I wanted to leave them. So I decided not to go to university. I decided to get an apprenticeship. I loved engineering.
Yeah, because that's what you did.
That's what I did. I loved the way things mechanically moved together. I loved like systems and procedures. And so I just started writing to all the companies near me that had that kind of scheme. I remember, and this is showing my age a little bit, I remember I sent out like 100 letters. Like, you wouldn't send out letters today, would you?
But that is dedication.
Email. Yeah, because I was so motivated.
Yeah.
I just felt like I could achieve anything. And when I wanted something, I understood there were steps to get it, but you can get it. Like, everything's achievable.
Yeah.
You just need to understand there's a process.
Yeah.
And if you want that thing at the end of the line,
you
got to go through those steps.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I felt like.
You might have seen me pause there as you said that and look up. And it was only because it made me think, were you running into the powerful version of yourself?
Oh, maybe. And I'll take that.
Yeah, me too. Because like, I get it 100%. The power is so much more attractive than the pain.
Right.
And I wondered if you were just leaning into it. No, at all costs, I am going to lean into my power. And therefore I do not have to look at that pain.
But also maybe it was through seeing my mum and my dad do the same.
So you had that good role modelling.
So they came over here with a suitcase from Sri Lanka, that story,
Yeah,
right? Immigrants
I love that story.
and built something. And so I would have witnessed that.
Yes.
You know, maybe also I had some good role model teachers.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe I was following some sports people who were also showing me that.
Really important.
Right. And maybe all of these pieces of this like all these ingredients made this recipe for me.
Yeah.
And I got this apprenticeship in Cambridge, a place called Marshall Aerospace. So this was an aircraft apprenticeship, and they put so much time and effort into their young people. I will never be able to show that company the true thanks that I have for them.
Oh, that's so amazing, because you don't hear that very often anymore.
My goodness. Like, they dedicated like departments to their young people, and they trained you on the aircraft, fixing the aircraft, and then they would take you to be a designer. So I was designing aircraft parts, systems and structures.
How cool. That's what I said at the beginning. Like, you had the coolest job.
That's cool.
That is so cool.
And then
I'm jealous.
and I loved it because it was so technical.
Yeah.
Right? And it kept me motivated.
Yeah.
And actually, me and my friends laugh about it. It also, thankfully, stopped the party on Sunday.
Yes.
Right? So yeah, the party starts Friday night, early 20s.
It's got to end somewhere.
It's got to end somewhere. So whereas, like, if I had a job I didn't care about, who knows what would have happened.
Very true.
But Monday is work, and I love work, and I'm trying to progress at work. And that's what I did. I started progressing. I started working overseas for the company.
Wow.
So I was working in Dubai.
Wow.
Running some projects. And I'm like in my early 20s.
That is amazing.
And I was the youngest person the company had ever sent overseas. So I'm like flying, pardon the pun. I'm flying, right? So I'm doing really well career-wise. I'm having a great time at the weekends. Everything is going phenomenally well. Then at 25 years old, everything starts to change. I start recognizing that I'm having low bouts of sadness, which were unusual for me. Upbeat guy. I'm not like the like highest person at the party. Like, I'm not that outspoken, right? But I'm an upbeat guy.
Yeah.
Love hanging out with the lads. Love getting with the girls in the club. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you're the fun one that everyone gravitates towards.
But something had changed. Now, interestingly, I think that the final trigger was because I was working in Dubai. I'd seen somebody who looked like him.
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? When you get that moment.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So you think over the years, the 14-year-old first kiss, first this, first that, maybe subconsciously realizing that this is not the first time I've done this. Then some years later, the Jimmy Savile thing, then the film, then maybe something else, then somebody cracks a joke about it, or I watch a comedian who cracks a joke about it. And
that's a big one. Do you know what? I'm so
mean?
glad you said that. That has always been a big trigger for me. Comedians. I love comedians, by the way.
Same.
I love to laugh. There's nothing better than that. But when comedians tell jokes about paedophiles or sex abuse, child sex abuse, I'm always a bit like, I know that, I'm not trying to cancel anyone here, by the way. Like, please do what you got to do, because it's fair, and everyone's triggered by something.
Yes.
But it is quite a big trigger when I hear people talk about, particularly Michael Jackson and making jokes. I find it really, and controversially, I've struggled to believe that Michael Jackson did what he did, and I'm quite open about saying that, because there's lots of different reasons why, and that might get me cancelled. But there's a whole thing around that particular thing where I'm like, I just feel so uncomfortable. I'm not going to ever, again, I would never cancel anyone for doing it or shout them out or be horrible about it. But I don't think people think about it when they say it.
No.
But I suppose that's the same when they're joking about disability, or they're joking about religion or race or whatever. It is that area of you can't really stop it.
It makes me feel uncomfortable, but it's their artistry.
Yeah.
And for some people, it's a real release.
It is a real release. And if we can't laugh at stuff, as much as it's triggering, if we can't laugh at it, then life can become a bit too serious.
Right. And they are expressing, I don't know, I don't like it. Yeah. Right. But I see its place.
Of course. We do need, and I'm glad that we're both on the same page with that, because there's too much of this just shutting everything down now, and the world's getting a bit crazy on that. Do you not think?
Yeah, I think so. And there's a comedian called Johnny Pelham who's been on like Live at the Apollo and things, and he's got a whole set about his sexual abuse in childhood. Wow. And he actually got Channel 4 to do a documentary on him.
Oh, wow.
And he's got tens of thousands of people who get some release in seeing him make a joke about himself.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
Yeah, I think it is too. So each to their own with that. Yeah. But for me, it definitely was a trigger seeing people make jokes about it. And this thing about possibly of seeing someone who looked like him, light skin, but from Sri Lankan background, stubble, kind of wavy hair, glasses. I'm pretty sure that was kind of the final straw.
Yes. Now,
I remember sitting in the hotel room thinking, accepting that, this is actually what happened.
So that was the first time you let it come
25.
To the forefront.
Yes. And then the next thought was, what the hell are we going to do about this?
So it was that quick. Yeah. The recognition and the acceptance, and what am I going to do? Yeah.
And the strategy was, well, you know what? It probably finished at 10 years old, 25 now, 15 years. We've been good all this time. So let's just continue pushing the memories away every time they come on strong, and like eventually they'll disappear. I tried it. Obviously that's not going to work.
No.
Memories come on stronger and stronger. They turn into flashbacks. They turn into night terrors.
Yeah.
2 years later, I finally surrender.
Tell me about the flashback. I mean, I've had flashbacks and night terrors myself, and talking in my sleep and stuff when I was a bit younger. Not so much now. In fact, never now. But also flashbacks come in different forms. Some people have very visual flashbacks where they can actually they see what's happened there in front of them. Some people it's more of a sort of a video playing in their mind, like you described earlier, which is the sort of flashbacks I've had, especially if there's been intimate moments. Sometimes that's caught me out there where I've suddenly gone and just the disgust washes across me, you know, all sorts of flashbacks. So would you be comfortable to explain some of yours?
The biggest one is night terrors.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same dream every time.
Yeah.
So I'm lying in my bed. He comes through the bedroom door. And every time he takes a step closer, I start shouting in my dream because I know it's a dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm trying to wake myself up.
Yeah.
And then I wake myself up with a scream.
God, it's awful, isn't it?
But I'm so relieved it's a dream.
Yeah.
And it's a real intense thing. Now, they have reduced most recently, but they were a thing. And I'd say that's when I really knew things had got really bad. You're not going to be able to handle this yourself. What's the next step? And where the next step come from, I got no clue because I wasn't following anybody that spoke about abuse on social media. Me and my mates would never talk about things like this. But I thought, you know what? You should tell one of your mates about what happened. That would be a good idea. It just felt so strong. It just, and I'm not a believer in God, but if I did believe, that I would put a narrative on that as if like that's a message to me.
It was like an energetic
it was like
thrust from
crazy
somewhere. Yeah.
Light bulb moment. Where did that come from? So I try it. Right now, I try it a number of times. Yeah, I'm in the pub with a mate. I'm watching a film with a mate. I'm just like in the car with a mate, and I'm just like, just tell them what happened. Just tell them, and I just couldn't. It took me so many times until I finally did, and that must have been maybe 6 months later. I sat my mate down. Right, so this is Luke, and he is a significant part in this story, and he is one of the boys that I met the year before the abuse started. Got you. At 7. So he'd known me all of this time. I'm now 27. So we'd actually known each other 20 years. And I said, mate, you are never going to believe what happened to me when I was younger. And honestly, like he could have guessed for days and then never got anywhere near the answer.
So what was his reaction when you told him?
The perfect reaction. He was confused. He was angry. He was saddened. He was disappointed. He was showing everything, but he didn't actually talk. He just gave me my space. I chatted about it and I chatted about it and I chatted about it, and he listened to everything. And when we finished, he said, you know what? Thank you for trusting me with that information. And if you need any support from this moment on, I'm there for you. Done.
I love Luke. Like, how do you know how to respond to that? Not many people know what to do, but he just knew what to do.
He is probably one of the pivotal moments in this whole story.
Yeah.
Because I woke up the next morning and I was surprised with how good I felt.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And I just remember it felt like this massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders.
It was someone had given you a bit of safety at the time when you were revealing the most difficult thing ever.
Yeah, and I voiced it for the first time. It's like now it's open, it's out there. And I'd battled in all of those times. I tried to say something to mates in the pub and watching a film, etc. I was battling with the embarrassment of it.
Yeah.
I was battling with the disgust of it.
Yeah.
I was battling with the what will they think.
Yeah.
I was battling with the this is going to change everything. I was also battling with the once I say something, I can't undo that.
That's the scariest bit.
Yeah.
That you can never put it away
right.
again. That had been
it's
white
out.
Noise for a long time. And suddenly this is a big loud siren.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can change that once you've said it.
And even if I decided to tell Luke and no one else, every time me and Luke met, I would know he knew. And every time us boys met and somebody said something or, said something in passing about this or that, Luke would know, I would know that actually that happened to me too.
Yeah. So again, even if it wasn't a constant siren, it would be there loud and clear, no matter what.
Yeah.
That's a brave decision, but you knew you needed to do it.
Something inside of me knew that that was the next step. Otherwise, we were going to be in trouble.
Yeah. God.
And that encouraged me to start telling more of these mates. I then told another 2 when we were out having a drink. I didn't plan that one. Just told them. And I said, look, Luke knows too. Then 6 months later, I tell another mate, then another mate, then another mate, then another mate, until all my close mates knew. Now, alongside this, I'm still progressing with my career, right? And I got a really nice vision because a senior engineer to me had recently left the company, and I was at a company that you don't leave, you're trying to get into, right? So it surprised me. Now, he said to me, once I wrote to him on LinkedIn, like, where the hell have you gone? He said, I've managed to get a job at McLaren Mercedes Formula One team. I've been selected to design parts on their cars. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, I didn't realize that was a pathway that was achievable for us. So he gave me the explanation. He said, the aerospace industry is like top tier engineering. Actually, space is top, is higher, but you know, it's pretty up there. So if you can get really skillful in that industry, you can pretty much go anywhere else. So then I made that my mission to try to get there. Because I thought, imagine watching the Grand Prix on a Sunday and cheering for the team and the car that you're part of. Like, that'd be a great thing to be involved in.
That is pretty cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it really is.
So I started working day and night trying to get towards this goal, right? Like researching at night. Now, I then started moving from job to job. I then got a job at Jaguar Land Rover in Coventry, so moving on to cars. I then got a couple of contracts in a couple of other places. I then worked in Switzerland, and then I managed finally to get a job at McLaren designing their road cars. Right, so I was selected to be on a limited edition vehicle that they were producing. It's called Speedtail, only 107 made, sold at 2 million each.
Oh, God.
I mean, it's crazy. And all were sold before it was even designed. So it's like a collector's item for these people. So I was selected to design the carbon fiber parts, hybrid system, and the crash structure. Now, this was the big move. Because I'd be working with cream of the crop engineers there. I could learn so much. It's McLaren. They've also got a Formula One team. So it just felt like one step away. Right. So I was at the pinnacle of my career at this point, right? I'm now 32 years old. I've now been speaking about my story of abuse from 27 to close friends. I then spread to their girlfriends and their wives. I then spoke to the parents of the friends that knew me back in those days. So you can see
the community.
I'm evolving this story. And with every single time I spoke, I grew in confidence. And the fear of saying it to the new people was starting to dissolve until it became something that I talk about passionately, encouraging, with strength and with courage. That's where you see the ingredients.
It's where we started the podcast.
So I'm doing all of this now. Once I'd spoken to all of these people, and having the second conversations with these people and the third conversations with these people, I started getting curious about what's going on out there. So I got online. Facebook groups, websites, chat rooms, thousands upon thousands of people telling their story. I literally couldn't believe it.
Because now you're not alone.
Right.
Now it's not just you telling your little community. There's a whole community of people also speaking about their experience.
And it's so common.
It's so common. People often ask me statistics on this, but I often say don't focus on the statistics because, and the reason for this is because they're not correct anyway. So whatever the statistics are, 1 in 4 or whatever it is at the minute, forget about that because there's so many more.
Yeah, it's such a good point.
Yeah.
Because there's more people who haven't said anything than have.
Of course. I think it's almost, unfortunately, quite normal.
Yeah. And that's such a sad situation that we're in.
And I don't mean, by the way, I don't mean sexual abuse in children. I just mean the abuse of the body in general, as well as sexual abuse in children. Yes. Because I don't want to minimise, girls that have, and boys, that have experienced sexual abuse a bit later. That they go, well, I was, and I've heard this. I was 18. I was out. I was I was wearing this. I was doing that. And I'm like, But if someone's touched you in a way that's inappropriate, which has happened to me, by the way, and I've only recently spoken, I've said this on a couple of podcasts now, about a time when I was 17, I was raped by 2 men, and it didn't even compute I was raped. Because at that point, I'd been sexually abused by my dad.
Yeah.
I'd been raped at 13 by a 20-year-old. So when I was 17 and I was raped by 2 men, and it was a violent rape, but my brain just went, it's fine.
Right.
So I only say that because I know that the older we get, the more we get. I'm going to tell you why, by the way, that I didn't compute that. When I'd told about my dad, and my dad went to prison, people at school and people in the street would literally shout abuse at me, telling me I enjoyed having sex with my dad, saying I stank of sex, I was a slag, I was fat, I was this. So I was actually really badly bullied because of it by a group of particular people, not by everybody. Okay. There was a lot of very kind people as well. But also all the adults around my mum and dad protected my dad. It was all about protecting my dad. I was going to say his name then. I don't think I've ever said his name publicly. But it was all about protecting my dad. And their children were encouraged to look at my dad in that way as well. So the narrative around me was, Ella's the problem child. Ella should never have said anything. We should have kept this within the family. Ella's loud and brash and all of this. So when I was raped at 13 by a 20-year-old, my assumption would be Ella's the problem.
Right.
So we won't say anything. It's no big deal. I'm used to being, and I didn't have this conscious thought, but I think my system went, you're used to being abused. It's fine. Carry on. 17, violent rape in a park. I walk home from a club with a man. There was no intention for me to have sex with him in my mind. We're walking through a park. There's a phone box before mobile phones, you see. He was going to call a taxi, drop me off first, and then go off and go to home. But he actually called a friend. The friend turned up. They violently raped me. I'm 17. They then drive off and I'm left on my own.
Wow.
Again, my body knows that this is wrong, but my thought process is, but this is what happens to you and you're the problem. People already think you're promiscuous. People already think you're a problem. People already bullied you over this. They're going to say it's you. They're going to say, this is you again, Ella. You can't hold down a job. You're self-harming, you're drinking too much, but it's your fault. And I just felt so strongly that was what was going to come out of their mouths. So I just went, okay, and cracked on with it. A bit like what you were saying and what I did when I was sexually abused. You just carry on. And if you've been, this is the issue, and it's a sub-issue of sexual abuse. If you've disassociated and desensitized yourself and you've gone to school a night after you've been quite horrifically abused, you have the ability to do that when it happens later on. And when it happens again, you have the ability to shut that down and carry on without anybody picking up any signs. Yeah. So this is why I say I know that the incidents of sexual abuse are higher than the statistics show. And I know that some people don't consider what they've experienced to be sexual abuse because of other conditioning that they've experienced as well.
And I get lots of messages and people will start it saying, what I went through wasn't as bad as what you went through.
Yeah. Oh, how many people say that?
Lots of people.
I get it all the time. I say this again and again and again. I'm so pleased to hear someone else say that.
There's no comparison.
There's no comparison.
We're not trying to set this on levels.
No. It's definitely not the competition that anyone wants to win.
Right.
Like, let's not try that.
Yeah. It's like, it's traumatic and horrific and should have never have happened.
And each person's brain will adapt to it differently.
Right.
So someone could consider it to be a bigger or a smaller trauma, but the person's personality type, epigenetics, that their experience of life already determines how well they'll cope with what they've been through.
Yeah.
You might cope really, really well with what you've been through. Somebody else might not. Yeah.
And I say this a lot because I say actually a large part of what I'm doing is for the people that don't get as fortunate of a reaction as I did. Yeah,
I hear that loud and clear. Yeah. If we can, we should.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
That work is so important. I think being seen and being heard and feeling like someone gets you and cares is the most healing thing you can receive. Right. And if one person comes across you or me or the many people that are in your community on your platform and go, I feel so seen, then that's That's everything.
It's just worth it.
Yeah.
Even though we're putting ourselves out there, we're putting ourselves online, this is a roller coaster ride of emotions and challenges. It's worth it for that reason.
It is, yeah. And so worth it that the story continues with your McLaren journey.
Yeah, okay. So that feeds nicely into the fact that I had then started researching online. I'd spoken to all these people. I'm 32 years old by this point. I've been doing this kind of work for 5 years, and I come across a story from an 80-year-old woman, right? And she says that she comes from an era where you could not speak about this even if you wanted to.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be received, it wouldn't be heard, it wouldn't be listened to.
Yeah.
And she explained that that suppression of her story had hindered her in so many different ways throughout her life. And when I read that, I thought, that is so sad.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I read it 5, 6, 7 times. And I thought, hang on a minute. I come from an era where you can speak about this. We have social media. We're progressing in this conversation.
Yeah, we are.
It's more listened to. It's more believed these days.
It definitely is.
100% compared to what she would have gone through.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I should probably try and do something about this. Now, you think I've had this huge journey up until this point. It's not like I started getting the memories and I thought this the next day, right? We've been on a journey with this story to come to that kind of thought process that I could probably try and do something about this. Now, very coincidentally, 2 weeks before this, I'd been to an open mic night. Right, it was the first open mic night I'd ever been to.
You went to an open mic night?
A spoken word open mic night.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
It was so cool. I was staying in London at the time, and I was just like, "This is a cool city. Never stayed in London before, and there's all these things going on. I should go and get involved." And I saw that this event was great because it's open to the public. Yeah. Anybody can come and sign up. They can read their poem, they can sing, play an instrument, do whatever they like. Comedy, dance. I thought it was such a great environment.
I love creative spaces.
Oh, so cool, so welcoming, you know, so encouraging. And I thought I could go as a storyteller and start telling my story to live audiences around London.
Oh my God.
That would be a good idea.
That is insane, but also very magical.
It was like another one of these light bulb moments. But at this time, I had an email in my inbox from Red Bull Racing.
Oh my God.
Can't believe it, can you?
No.
Saying that I'm going to be considered to be on their design team and they'd like to see me. So
oh no. Oh,
right.
So you've got 2 lives in one space.
And they've met. I've been working towards this Formula 1 dream for 5 years, but I've been talking about my story for 5 years and researching it for 5 years too.
So you're invested.
So it has come to a crossroad. Now I take the interview. I'd usually be preparing 24/7 for an interview like this. I didn't do no prep. I just didn't care about it anymore.
Something had changed.
Something had changed. Went to the interview, completely wasted their time. I'd like to say sorry to them and to all the other candidates that didn't get that spot.
This feels like a reverse Oscar speech.
And needless to say, I didn't get the job, but I honestly didn't care.
Oh my God.
I then quit my job at McLaren because I decided that I wanted to commit fully to this idea of taking this story public.
Wow.
I gave my flat back to the landlord. I was working up in Sheffield at that time. I packed everything that I needed into my car and I hit the road.
With nowhere to go?
With nowhere to go.
This is like a film.
Now, obviously, I now need to start telling more people about what happened. But before I did that, I had something to address. When I say more people, obviously, I've quit my job. I've got nowhere to live. Probably my family are going to start asking me what the hell is going on because at this moment, they don't know.
Of course.
It's just friends that know.
Yes.
Girlfriends, wives.
Yes.
Parents.
Yes.
Right? That's all that know. So I'm now, lots is going on in my life. I've quit my job. I've turned down this dream of Formula 1. I'm ready to take my story public. but I needed to move the story on a little bit. Because in all the conversations I've been having with my mates over the years, there were always two questions that kept coming up. Number one, where was the man that did this to me now?
Yeah.
Number two, was he still doing it to more children?
Yeah, big question, yeah.
I hated the question, spoke with my mates about it because I knew what it meant. I felt like I needed to go and find out.
Yeah.
So I started researching online. I had his name, found his Facebook profile. Pictures of him, his wife, his two daughters.
Oh my God.
Smiling at Christmases, smiling on holidays.
How did you feel?
Oh my goodness.
What a big question to ask, actually. It's probably too big.
No, there's no question that's too big. Heart's racing. I can't believe it. I can't believe that's his face.
Yeah.
He looked exactly the same.
God.
It's like he hadn't changed.
Yeah.
I'm panicking.
Yeah.
But I'm staring at this picture knowing I've just got to keep staring at it.
Yeah.
So I decided to write him a message.
You had stepped into your power and beyond at that point.
So in response to what you just said there, I must have felt so powerful because otherwise this is a lot.
Yeah.
This is a lot, yeah.
Yeah. You always had that power, by the way.
Yeah,
that you survived it all, yeah.
Yeah, throughout.
But you really stepped into it.
So I said to him, I know you remember who I am. We've got a lot to talk about all those things that happened 20 years ago. So you need to come and meet me. A place of your choice, coffee shop, park, I'll come to wherever you want. But you are to come and meet me. And if I don't hear back from you in 24 hours, I'm going to have no choice but to go to the police.
What a message. What was the response?
I come back to my computer 2 hours later and he blocked me.
Oh my God. Well, I don't know why I'm surprised because obviously that's what I would expect. But just for you.
Oh my God, how did I take that? I mean...
Did that enrage you?
Yeah, that's anger. That's fury. And actually, I say this for the days in the years to come where I'm allowed to tell you more of that story, but there's a lot more to that message exchange. But just for now, due to what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say, that's how the story goes. But that's a summary of the story, but there's more to it. But
you can't legally say.
And I hope one day I will be able to, maybe with him when I interview him.
Yeah.
So I report the crime to the police.
You did go ahead and say what you were going to do. Good.
They took my details, asked me to come to the station. I gave my statement, 3 hours.
People don't realise this stuff is arduous. When you give a statement about this, they go over and over and over and over and over. They have to get it 100%, if not 200% right.
They need every little bit of detail you can ever think of.
And it is quite, I mean, I did it when I was a kid, but I remember it just being like, oh, can we not stop now? Like, there's so much detail.
When did you do it?
I was 11.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I think it was 4 hours. Because obviously they take a bit longer with children. But it was before the days of, they came to the house.
Okay.
So it was the day that someone took a diary out of my hand at school and it went around because it was in my diary.
Okay.
Actually, I was giving it to someone to read, a friend, and then someone snatched it off of them. Another boy, I can remember his name. Wow. I won't say it to embarrass him, but basically the
oh my goodness,
diary went around the school. Yeah, and I ran into the toilets. Anyway, it was never my intention that my dad would get arrested. I just wanted someone to know, a bit like you know, that beginning of telling someone. It was the most horrific feeling. That was probably one of the worst feelings, the sense of responsibility of like, now my dad's going to be arrested and my mum's going to hate me and my brother and sister are going to hate me and my world is over. I don't even know if I've got a home. You know, I'm thinking all of that. Anyway, it takes hours because they've got to arrest my dad, which I felt so guilty about. I didn't want him to be arrested. You know, it was still my dad at the end of it. It was a very difficult, I can't even really put it into words. Yeah. But then it was hours and hours and hours of police statements.
How did it feel to be questioned like that at 11 years old?
It was awful because I wanted to say, oh, can we just forget about this now, please? I don't want this anymore. It was never, this was supposed to be a friend of mine that read this, but I didn't say that, but I wanted to say that, but I had to go through with something that I hadn't really fully chosen. I just needed to, I always say it's like a pressure cooker. I just needed to let some of the pressure out by telling someone. And actually what happened was it was taken out of my hands. Okay. So then to sit there for 4 hours and go through every detail, and some of the detail is not stuff that an 11-year-old girl feels comfortable to repeat, but you have to say it. Like you say, they need every detail.
Yeah. Because we're also coming from an era where there's no evidence.
Absolutely,
like there's no photograph, there's no there's no text message, there's no record of any interaction.
Correct. So you would have had that exact same problem because you're going historical.
Yes.
So there was a journal. That was the only bit of evidence. You know, a child is not going to write something like that in a journal if it's not true. But other than that, and then I had to have a physical examination. Wow. So that was quite horrible. I don't know how much I can say on this, but actually I'm going to say it because it's something that's come up again. Because it was 34 years ago, a journalist was working with me on this story. They wanted to put it out.
Okay.
I mean, I've written a book about it and it's been very publicly spoken about. But hopefully someone from the police service or the court service can help if they do hear this. The PA Media, who were going to put it out, who are the biggest global PA, what's the word I'm looking for? Media subsidiary or distributor, sorry, and all the other big names like the Daily Mail, Daily Mirror, they all get their stuff from there. So this was going to be a big article, and they can find no evidence of my dad ever being arrested, imprisoned. Wow. I can tell you the prisons that he went to. I can tell you the dates. I can tell you the age that I was. I give it all of his details. But because it was, they've had, do you know Mossivo, the police service? They're like the sexual crime subsidiary of the police service. They've had so many different databases since 34 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And the Sex Offenders Act didn't come out until afterwards. All I have, and I'm only saying this publicly because a journalist has contacted me again today because somebody else wants to cover it. I only have a court reference number, but they've even gone through written notepads because some of it was handwritten, and there's no sign of it. Now, the reason I say this is because obviously if my dad has seen anything online about what I've been speaking about, which is quite possible, he's never contested anything I've said for a reason. And that reason is because he doesn't want to bring that to himself, and I don't really want that. So I've got to be careful I never say his name. That's not the point of me speaking out. It's not to punish him. Right. It's to do exactly what you were talking about. But the point being is he could walk into a school and volunteer as a reader and he wouldn't do this, by the way. I've got to be very clear. My dad isn't someone that goes out and abuses lots of children, or hasn't done that to my knowledge, to be clear. But he could go and do a job working with children because there's no record. And you talk about the historical element there of giving statements and the lack of evidence. There is also a lack of data on people that far away. Right. So if there are any police officers or anyone listening to this, please get in touch with me, because I do actually, the reason I say it is PA Media, their legal team they desperately wanted to run the story to the point where the journalist said to me, I'll go to their house and I'll tell him I'm running this story. And I was like, no, I don't want you to turn up at his. Can you imagine if he opens the door, there's a flipping journalist on his doorstep saying, can we talk about what you did to your daughter all those years ago? So I said, no, please don't do that. And I put a stop to it. But if we could do it without him having to be confronted, because it would be done delicately and tastefully. But yeah, it goes to show that if it's historical, it isn't straightforward.
It's not.
No.
And what can they do if there's no true evidence? They can't really take it anywhere.
But the problem is he went to prison. He went to 2 prisons. I won't say what because I don't want to say too much. I don't know how much legally I can say. He went to 2 prisons, one where he was held in remand and one where he was sentenced and stayed there. He was obviously seen through the main courts, not the magistrates, for that type of crime. He was arrested.
Wow.
And there would be medical records, surely. The school I went to was knocked down and there's houses there now. So we can't even go to the school to look for that. GP records. I don't know my NHS number. I'm still trying to get on that because there will be. But the journalist even said to me, "Can you remember where you went for your internal examination?" I'm like, "No, I've no idea where it went. I remember it was a woman that did it, and I do remember the gloves as well because they're the sort of things a kid remembers. They don't remember the address. So I know that there's stuff that you should be able to find, but no one can find it.
Do you know what? These systems and these procedures, I know for these moments we're talking about the old ones, right? But I'm going to guess that the current ones are still
not right.
Archaic.
Yeah, I think they are archaic. Yeah. I think there's so many loopholes. I mean, it's even worse if before those, the Sex Offenders Act. I think it must have been 5 years later that came to fruition.
Okay.
Because I remember feeling scared that, my dad's name will be on there and everybody will know. They already all knew, but I just remember being a bit fearful. Like I felt quite protective that he didn't get beaten up in the street and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so that's the whole thing.
Yeah, and when I was being interviewed, there was one officer there.
Only one?
And he couldn't stop apologising.
Yeah.
Because he said after recent government funding cuts, they don't have enough money to have 2 officers in there anymore. One taking care of the person's well-being and the other one asking the questions.
Oh my God.
So we are still...
We're still going backwards.
We're in the Stone Ages.
Government, you see, they don't seem to think it's a priority.
The police were fantastic.
Yeah, of course.
And I just want to shout out the police that were involved in my experience.
Yeah.
They kept me updated. They did everything they can in my true belief.
Yeah.
It was just because of a lack of funding that they couldn't take my case to court.
Unbelievable.
Because they can only take a certain percentage of what they've got on the table that year to court, the strongest ones.
Yeah.
Right? Mine didn't make the cut.
Oh my God, that's devastating.
What's devastating about it is that I wanted my parents to never find out about what happened.
And they had
what good is going to come from that?
Yeah.
Yeah. During that police process, because there was not enough evidence from what I could give, they needed to know things like how often was he round? How did he get round? The only person that knows the answer to a question is my dad.
Oh no.
And once that police investigation got called off, I thought, what a waste.
Yeah, you had to go through so much.
My parents now know.
Yeah.
Their lives are now ripped apart.
Because there must be they
blame each other. They don't blame each other.
They blame themselves.
They blame themselves.
Yeah.
Of course, think about my dad.
Yeah.
Now, my dad ain't around anymore.
Oh, no.
Died February 2022. Spiraled out of control.
Because of this, do you think?
Couldn't handle it.
That's horrendous.
Yeah. He had his own troubles anyway. But this one pushed him over the
saying
edge.
he took his...
He didn't take his own life.
But his body had too much.
He had a heart attack whilst eating dinner.
Oh my God.
He walked around with his head down. He couldn't see joy in anything anymore.
Oh no.
He felt like the whole thing was his fault.
And all of that when they didn't even take it to court. So there was he couldn't even see justice be done. What a shame. That's so sad.
Now, when we tidied up his room, there was a photo of this man in his bedside table.
So
all I could think of, because we only spoke about it twice, the day I told him and the day he gave his statement, all I can think of is he had to release his emotions somehow.
Yeah.
And I know he was not sleeping.
And so he'd look at it.
I reckon. But I'll never know.
But remember when you described how you looked at that photo when you saw on Facebook, just like, I have to keep looking at this photo.
Yeah. Yes.
It must have been the same for you. I have to keep looking at it.
I've never made that connection.
It probably was the same. He was probably trying to work something out.
Now, obviously, we're many years some years later now, and I'm all over social media, and I'm online and doing things like this. So he would have found out anyway eventually. But it just is a very, very sad
very
time.
sad for you as well. Like, the whole thing's so sad.
I remember where I was in like a high street, and when I got the phone from the police, I felt lost,
let down by the system.
Yeah.
Which so many people will go through.
I don't think I did feel let down though.
Really?
I feel like I was on a pursuit to get him put on the sex offenders register at the very least.
Yes.
So that we can monitor what he was doing online and what job he's doing and what access he has to other children.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You can even do that.
It's all good about the conversation about justice and revenge and peace, and it's all there, right? And being able to let go of it when you get a secured prosecution, that's all there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to say like that wasn't any part of that journey,
mm-hmm.
but the bigger part was, is he still doing it to more children?
To try and protect others.
Because if I wasn't the first, I needed all those other people who he touched to come forward and stop him before he got to me.
Yeah.
So I need to do the same to any other children.
Yeah.
And that's the responsibility that I still hold today.
I mean, I'm not often speechless, but there's a lot tied into your movement. It's not just about having a safe space for other people to join you and find that hope and that strength and that courage, but it's also about trying to stop this man from doing what he's doing.
And all the others,
yeah.
Like, we have to do something about this.
We do, and that opens up another conversation that we had off camera earlier. Both of us are of the same thought process here about, I know this is difficult for you because people have been you've had mixed reactions to this. But I really want to say this as well. When I've spoken about my own experience and people have asked me if I've forgiven my dad, I've always said yes, and I've explained why. And I use the principles of IFS psychotherapy, and I talk about how all of us have different parts. Some are good, some are bad, some are exiles, so they're like vulnerability, guilt and shame. Some are more angry, some are more controlling. And essentially, when a person is sexually abused, particularly a boy, particularly at a certain time in their life, their testosterone is forming, puberty is forming, and if their sense of masculinity or power is taken away at that point psychologically and in terms of brain structure, that's very damaging, and they might unconsciously develop a protector part, which is the predator, because if they can put on the cloak of predator, they're no longer the victim.
Right.
So there are some people that have been sexually abused, mainly men that do that, but some women also, and there are that become abusers, but there are also people that are attracted to children, sexually attracted to children. There are also psychopaths, and there's so many different variants of sex offenders, and such a wide spectrum that if we just go right, string them up, lock them away, we're never actually going to resolve this problem. We have to understand this is extremely controversial, what I'm about to say, and probably another moment where I could get cancelled, but I'm willing to say it. If you think about primitive man and the way that we were thousands of years ago, we would die around 35, sometimes 40, if we were lucky. The way that we look at procreation and those sorts of things is that if we were dying at, say, 35, that means that when we were having babies, we were a lot younger. So there's a theory that says that men are hardwired to be attracted to the developing female child, so that he knows that she's ready to be impregnated, so that procreation happens and all of that. So with that in mind, I think it's really difficult, this subject, to talk about, but I think some people are still less developed socially. I know we've evolved, and I know most men and women have evolved, and we don't find children attractive, and that's a natural thing. I certainly don't find children attractive. It's natural for me to not find children attractive. But I think if we could look at it almost like there's a potential, I've got no evidence to prove this right now, but I know there's lots of research papers on it, that some people are sort of stuck in a throwback and they are still attracted to children. if they haven't been abused themselves, that could explain that theory. And obviously someone might say, well, what if it's a boy? Well, that then becomes more of a power thing as well. And there's lots of different things involved in that. Again, too many pieces to discuss in one episode. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are areas of this topic that you've just explained there, and I think it was a great explanation, and many other areas along those lines.
Yeah.
Right. What in someone's life drives them to sexually abuse a child is a conversation that I am disgusted that we're not having.
Yeah, me too, because people think they're doing the right thing by shutting it down. People think, well, why are you talking about that? Who cares why they do it? Who cares why they do it? I do, because I was one of those kids that was sexually abused. You were one of those kids that was sexually abused, and we don't want that to happen to other children. So if we don't get in at the root level, how the hell are we going to change it? You said something about, you've posted something like this before on your social media, and you get the gun emoji thing. Explain that for the listeners.
So I brought a couple of people onto my podcast to discuss what we're going to do with the people who know they've got an attraction to children, who have accepted that that's in their head, and they would come forward for help if it was available. That's not everyone. No. But that's at least 1% of the people that have a sexual attraction towards children, right? So also the conversation of what are we going to do once the offender has served their prison sentence and are released back into our community. Those two conversations are very important to prevent the offence from happening in the first place or again. Yes. And that's what we're after. Yeah. And if we can't talk about it, how are we going to achieve it? Yeah. What is not productive is this celebration we have every time we lock a paedophile up. Yeah. As if we've achieved something. Yeah. We haven't achieved anything. No, we haven't. We're late.
Yeah, we're too late.
The crime has already been committed. The child has been hurt. Where were we in all the stages before it got to that point? Yes. Now, I've heard, because I reviewed a documentary on my YouTube channel, which is very interesting, that there's only 3 therapy centres
in the world
for offenders. Sorry, not offenders, but also people who would rather go and
rehabilitate.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, rehabilitate is a word that people get furious about.
Yeah, they do.
You can't mend these people. I don't care whether you can mend them or not. That's not my conversation. Yeah. Right? My conversation is, how are we going to get them to resist the temptation of doing it?
You could probably never take it away fully.
I don't think you ever could.
No.
And there's a big conversation which I've posed on my social media a number of times and got lots of kickback, which I lose sleep over. Like, it's really hurtful when I feel misunderstood, right?
Yeah, of course.
Is paedophilia, which is a diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Is it in the brain from birth, or is it something in someone's life that makes them that way? This is the most important conversation.
It is.
Right? Because we're trying to prevent it from happening in the first place.
Yeah.
So you get so much anger from the general public, but my anger is that the crime is continuing. It's, in my guess would be, it's increasing.
Yeah.
And if we don't get a hold on this, then we are failing the younger generations.
Yeah.
And putting gun emojis in the comment section is so unproductive, because we don't give the death sentence for any crime in this country.
Yeah.
So unless you're going to go out there and campaign for it, don't give that response. It's not productive.
Yeah.
Right? Let's find out the next solution that we have.
Yeah.
Now, I know in Florida, I got sent some videos. They've got a new law where if you rape a child under 12, you get the death sentence. I'm all for these evolving laws.
Yeah.
Right? And let's have a conversation about them.
Yeah.
But let's do what we can right now, and let's move forward. I've
Yeah.
had the director of a charity called Lucy Faithful Foundation onto my podcast, and he said that they opened an anonymous phone line for anyone who's worried about what they're watching online to come forward. In the first year, they received 7,000 calls from men worried about what they've got in their head.
Wow.
And if you think about those 7,000 that actually dialed that number, how many didn't?
Yeah. And this is the point, isn't it? It's what I was saying about the hard wiring, you know, about the primitive hard wiring, and then the more sort of environmental problems that they might have experienced, you know, the sort of societal issues.
Did pornography take them down a rabbit hole?
Exactly. Those sorts of conversations have to be had.
Right.
And the gun emoji thing, I know what people are trying to do. They say, I hate it, and they're expressing themselves. But the point being is, here you are, Jeremy, having had this lived experience, having gone on a massive journey that's still not complete from what you've said, wanting to do something from so many different angles here. Like you're not just looking at it from the survivor's angle,
right.
You're looking at it from the perpetrator's angle as well, which is rare. And I've never met anyone, I feel like there's a mirror image going on right now, who feels as passionately as I do, as I can't even get that sentence out, as passionately as I do about it.
Yes.
Because I think because it was my dad, I always thought it was because it was my dad. I've always had a level of empathy that I think is difficult to describe, because you've got two people, you've got your dad and you've got the abuser in the same body. And I wish that I didn't have that experience of sexual abuse with him, because I'd love to have a dad and I'd love to have a mum. I don't have it either, because they're together and they're not my parents. But I haven't got that. But I want to do something positive with that experience. And I know you do, because as a psychotherapist, you can imagine how many people I see that have gone through that similar trauma that we have. And I'm one person. Yeah. But when you can be one person with a wide reach, it can change. It can, if you never changed a law or changed a perception for the entire world, there's sections of people that are hearing it that then, as they're growing up or they're developing a keener interest in this area, they could be the next lawyer or neuroscientist or rehabilitation centre operative. You know, that's what this is.
Yes. It's almost like our goal isn't necessarily to change these things, it's to spark the minds that will change.
Yeah,
these
you're
things.
right. You're so right. And I think, you know, I did say to you, I wonder if because I get a really positive feedback, some quite offensive DMs, but on the whole, quite a positive feedback in the comment section. And you were saying, actually, sometimes people are angry at you maybe for opening up this conversation. And I said, I do wonder if it's because you're a man.
Yeah.
And it's easier to be angry at a man, maybe. I don't know. That could be just absolute rubbish. But there's something, isn't there, where they don't like you doing it.
Yeah.
But I really respect what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I think I've even said to you off camera that I would like to keep you in my pocket for some of the work that I'm doing, because I actually think you're fundamental in
that's amazing.
In changing perceptions.
It's like this. I want to try to turn this subject on its head. And when I left my job and pursued this, taking my story public, that was one of my ideas, was to try to make this interesting and engaging instead of only sadness and sorrow, which is what we talked about before we started recording, because only sadness and sorrow means you turn the other way. Yeah. And also, after doing all that research and speaking to my friends, I could see that the survivor circles are strong, but how am I going to get this subject outside of the survivor circles onto everybody's table? So I started doing this open mic thing, right?
Yes.
So I booked onto my first event, Brixton, at a place called the Ritzy, right?
Wow.
I was well out of place. There was singers, instrument players, dancers and stuff, right? And I'm there with my story. The first time I'd ever told anybody who I didn't know.
Amazing.
I'm downstairs grabbing a drink. People are arriving at the event and I've got my head in my hands thinking, you don't have to do this. Like, the feeling was probably the most intense feeling I've ever had. There's about 100 people there. Got on stage. I was third on. I look out into the audience. The lights are so bright, blinding me. And I start to tell my story.
How did you start, by the way? I know this is a detail, but...
It's all good. So it was actually an event called True Story Spark, True Story, something like that. So it was a story orientated.
Right.
But some people were like doing their poetry and it's all like happy, funny stories.
Oh my gosh.
I spoke about the fact that I just lost my job and I'm on a mission. And this is the reason why. And it's the first video on my YouTube channel.
I'd never seen this first video. I'm
Yeah.
going to watch this now.
So if you go to my YouTube channel, Jeremy Indika, click videos, you can click oldest.
I'm going to go
and you
to
can
that.
see the first one. And you should see the nerves. You can't believe it.
But I love that because it's so authentic.
Yeah, it's so real.
Yeah.
It's so real. And whenever I feel like things aren't going, you know, you get that little voice in your head, I just go to that video.
Yeah.
I knew what I wanted, even from that day, my first open mic. I knew what I wanted because I'm an engineer and I'm programmed to be an engineer. I'm a problem solver.
Yeah.
Right? I know about mechanisms and
Yeah.
why the output isn't working.
Yeah.
And so I started open micing. I'm now sleeping at friends and family's houses, moving around the country because I've got no accommodation, right? I've given all that up and I've got no income, but I had incredible life savings, right? Incredible life savings. I had £65,000.
So you had a little bit of rest space.
Right. So I had money in the bank that would do me very good.
Yeah.
I'd worked hard for that money.
Yeah.
And very kind of interesting with the way life unfolds. You know, when I had all this money in the bank, I thought about getting a mortgage and I thought about this and that and you know I heard about this property thing and you know I was in this position where I had all this like this good bank balance. What could I do with it? I could make more money. I didn't do any of those. They felt boring. Thank goodness I didn't invest that money because I had something better to invest it in.
Yeah.
So I had a vision. I started open micing. I'd spend 10 days at my mum's, 10 days at my sister's, 10 days at this friend. And as I started doing this, I started like recording my performances and putting them online. I started writing posts about it. People started knowing about it. Basically all my friends that had a spare room give me a key to their house.
Wow.
Anyone that I'd like known along the way, this engineer friend that I worked with over here for 2 years, like they started seeing what I was putting out there and they all were like, we got a spare room. So I'd move every 10 Coventry, Surrey, down in Cornwall, over in Brighton. I'd move
and you just go to all
the open mic nights in those areas.
This is the coolest story.
I'd spend all day restructuring the performance, thinking about putting that bit at the start. I'm thinking, in the pubs that I like, you know, then when you go to these like not London, right, and you're in a pub, right, and you're like, right, I started doing a bit of rhyming and putting some music behind it.
And this is all on your YouTube?
All on my YouTube. Then I started with a question. I can't remember what the question was, but that one worked really well.
Yeah.
It wasn't a question about sexual abuse. It was something else. I can't remember what it was now. It was many years ago. And it got the audience engaged. And then I'd slowly lead them into what I was talking about. So I started playing around with these ideas, trying to be as creative as I could. I spent all day doing it and then go and perform in the evening. But this was tiring because I'd move every 10 days not to outstay my welcome everywhere.
Of course, yeah.
So I had like 5 t-shirts, 2-3 pairs of jeans. Like I'd have to recycle this stuff, you know, as minimalistic lifestyle. Yeah. And in doing this, in posting about it, you know, I got to my first 1,000 followers, you know, and on the open mic scene, in particular in London, I found the spoken word community full of creatives and people were like, I've got some camera equipment. Do you want to turn that into like a video? I was like, yeah. They're like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Like I usually charge X amount, but I'll do it. I was like, yeah, I've got this money. Like, let's use this money. So I was paying for my phone bill, my car, my food. Most people were feeding me though. And these projects, I started working with animators. I started working with photographers.
Amazing.
Trying to make this creative, trying to tell the story in different ways. But then the more I learned about it, the more podcasts I started listening. I started talking about the other areas, the offenders, the parents who are suffering after finding out that's happened to their child. What's trauma? What's PTSD? I knew none of this. I knew about machinery, right? So I was on a journey learning too through making this work and trying to make it artistic.
Yeah.
So 1,000 followers, then I made 2,000 followers. Then I got a message from like Europe, and then I got a message and I was like, this is really doing something. I do this for 2 years. Sorry, I do this for like a year, let's say, but I'm just spending my money, right? People are worried. Jeremy, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, do you not think that you should engineer and then do this in the evening? You know, what are you going to do? All your money's going. Like, what, you're going to take it to zero? And I was like, yeah, damn right, I'm taking it to zero, because by zero, I calculate how much time that is. By then I would have been able to build something.
Yeah.
But how are you going to build something, Jeremy? How do you even make money out of something like this? My answer was, I don't know, but I believe something unique can be created. You just
I
gotta
love
believe.
that.
You
I
just
love
gotta
it. You've
believe.
got to believe. You've got to believe creatives. And I don't think people realise, sometimes they don't realise they are a creative
Yeah.
until something like this happens.
Yeah.
Creatives, you don't always have the answer.
You haven't got the answer because you're creating it.
You're creating it, and it works.
Right.
Like, I'm telling you now, an idea. The training school I mentioned to you earlier, which is launching this year, that was an idea in COVID.
Right.
It was just starts with an idea,
Yep.
and then my creative mind starts to do the visualizations, and I sort of described it to you a bit earlier. That didn't come till this year. Well, no,
Right.
I say this year, I mean 2023. We're 2024 now. But that really didn't come till this year. And then the writing of it all and the finding the pieces of the puzzle. You don't know when it's first birthed.
And it's evolving in your head
all the time. And you, even when you're not thinking about it, it's kind of, you are thinking about it.
It's like it's cooking
all the time.
Yeah.
It's the slow cooker.
Yeah. It is.
It's the slow cooker.
It is.
It's so true. But then if you just believe, actually, all I've got to do is stir that up, and yes, I've got to go without for a long time, but the passion, the purpose, the drive, that fire in your belly that was once a pain is now your purpose and your passion. It works every time.
And it's such a driver.
It's such a driver.
And it was fun as well. You know?
I bet.
Trying to capture that audience's attention. Now, it didn't always go very well.
No, I'm sure there were times when it didn't.
So, Peckham, open mic night, the wrong audience, the wrong event. I was last on. It's like 11:30.
Oh, God.
Crowd are half drunk. It's only music, but I've gone. And I always said to myself, every time I wanted to go home, this is stage time and this is what's building you.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
I got up on stage, start doing my thing. I could see there's some kind of disturbance in the audience, but I can't clock it because I'm trying to remember my lines.
Yeah.
And a guy stands up and he goes, "Don't you know this is nighttime entertainment? And you come here talking about kids getting touched? Get off the stage." And I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm frozen. Another member of the audience stands up and starts shouting at him saying, "Well, if we can't talk about it now, when can we talk about it?"
No.
Then another member of the audience stands up and says something, and then it just turns into this big thing.
Were you filming it this night?
No, I didn't film it that night.
Shame.
I didn't film it that night. I picked up the mic. I put the microphone down. I thought, I don't need to be involved in any of this. It started getting real heated. I picked up my backpack and I left. And I got on the bus and I thought, it was another one of those moments where I thought, you should pack this up. This ain't going to work. But it's just a flash thought. Because as soon as that flash thought comes in, it gets overpowered with, yeah, but how can I make sure that never, how could I have responded better? How could I?
There was a moment of magic there, actually.
Yeah, that's what people say.
Yeah, that is the moment of magic.
Say.
Because that's when you could have, if you'd have had more experience,
you
could have cultivated that conversation.
Yeah, that's what people say.
Yeah.
That camera's gone off. Is that all right?
I noticed that. That one's on that. They're all, that monitor's only got 2 hours on it. So it's probably... Oh no, yeah, it's just under 2 hours. So it's that's the backup.
Okay, cool.
So it's only a backup.
So we're still going?
We're still going. So yeah, so there's this moment of magic where you could cultivate a wider conversation.
Create a conversation.
In an environment where, okay, it was volatile perhaps, but with a bit more experience and a bit more skill, you could have taken that to another level.
And what people were saying when I started posting about what had happened, because that's what I started doing, explaining the journey as it went.
Of course.
They were like, what you managed to do was start a conversation in a place that they'd probably never had the conversation before.
Yeah.
That's your goal, isn't it? To get this on people's table that have never thought about it before.
In their living rooms, basically.
Yeah.
And if you think of pubs and social working men's clubs, they're the sort of places where that would happen.
Yeah.
That's where people did have those conversations.
Yeah.
And it would be over a few drinks.
Yeah.
So you were just if you like, the fire starter.
Yeah.
But you just needed to be there to make sure that it was controlled. However, not the right night to do it on that occasion.
No. And I think maybe after that, I started selecting my nights a bit more purposefully, or maybe I didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe I just still continued because I spoke at 100 events.
100 events?
Before COVID hit, yeah.
Okay, because that
Yeah.
must have been a moment then
Yeah.
when you're doing all of this work and then COVID hits.
Online. But I then kind of started transforming to YouTube channel and other
Yeah.
things, and things have started to move away. I started doing less and less open mics.
Yeah.
Because I'd done a lot of them and I'd got that stage presence, and I feel like that was a general shift into that. So it didn't affect me too much.
Yeah, I suppose because you'd already built the foundations, you could now just continue that.
But a year before COVID, I was still feeling this anger that he denied what had gone on.
Yeah.
And I spoke to my mates about what had happened, what I was feeling. And they said to me, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I just really need to get in front of him. And we brainstormed that. And the only way we could think of doing it was to find out where he lived and knock on his door.
For those that are listening and not watching, there's not a glitch there. That was just my jaw dropping.
So I'm running all this open mic thing. I'm doing all this work online. I'm feeling so positive about it. People are concerned about what I'm doing in my life, but they're still supporting me. Strong set of friends, strong family supporting me. I still had about 2/3 of my money left in my bank. So we were doing okay. I saw a way forward, but you know, in my personal life outside of all of that, I had this problem. So I started digging. I find his address.
This is like Columbo stuff now.
This is so crazy, isn't it? I mean, think about how many times I've told this story, and it's still so crazy every time I tell it. For me, and I've spoke it so many times. Now, much like the messaging exchange on social media, there's a lot more to this part of the story, but I can't tell it. So I summarize it in the best way that I can. My mates were like, we're worried because if he does answer the door, how do you know it's not going to get out of hand? And the response that I gave which was enough for me to feel confident, was I'd be very surprised if I got out of hand. And it was a strong response to their concern. So I drive to his house. I park outside. I look at the door. And I think, okay, I'm going to do it. Very interestingly, it wasn't a predetermined decision, but I decided to put my phone on voice record and put it in my pocket.
Clever.
And that proves how confident I was.
Yeah.
That I wasn't going to lose.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I walk up to the door and I knock. Porch light comes on. Key starts turning from the inside. The door opens and it's him.
Oh, God.
I couldn't believe it. And nor could he.
What did he do?
Went to slam the door shut instantly. And I think the most important thing that happened at that moment was I managed to get my foot in front of the door. And I had chunky Vans on. My toe was on the door and my heel was on the threshold.
Right.
So physically, there was no way of getting the door shut.
Yeah.
And him continuously trying to slam it was not hurting my foot.
Yeah.
And I started telling him everything that I always wanted to tell him.
Wow.
I called him out on everything.
Wow.
I used all the language.
Yeah.
He's trying to shout over me, trying to drown out my voice. His wife's in the background calling the police. It must have sounded like mayhem on the phone.
Yeah.
Must have sounded like mayhem.
Yeah.
He calls for a knife.
He calls for a knife.
Yeah. His wife goes, "Don't be so stupid. I'm not getting that." And I'm like, oh.
Interesting.
That's weird. She knows who I am because she was involved in the police investigation.
Oh, so she already knows.
She knows who I am.
Yeah.
She would have had to give a statement, right?
Of course.
This was like a year. I'm knocking on his door a year after the police investigation's been closed. So she knows who I am.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a weird response, or a response worth looking into. But the police arrive. They come for me. I'm by this point waiting at the end of the drive because I've said everything that I needed to say to him.
Yeah.
And they jump out of their police cars, blue lights, the lot. They ask me what I'm doing here. I point at the door and I say, that's the man that sexually abused me as a child and I've come to speak to him about it. Changes everything. The whole vibe changes. They go and ask him and his wife some questions. They ask me some questions. They come to me and they say, we're so sorry, but they want to press charges against you. So I was handcuffed, pockets emptied. What's this phone on record for? Oh, just so you've got evidence of everything that just happened. Oh, okay. Put in the back of the police car, taken to the station. Belt removed, shoelaces removed, clothes changed, in the cell. Looking up at the ceiling, thinking, this is not an ideal situation to be in.
No.
But I got my time in front of him. He didn't manage to slam the door in my face, which would have been something very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
And his wife didn't get the knife.
Yes.
Because I don't think I would have moved.
Wow.
I don't think I would have moved.
No.
Because I wasn't scared. Because in that confrontation at the door, I had the power. He was scared.
Yeah.
The tables had turned.
Yeah.
There was no fear in me. So I was then interviewed. Then COVID hit. There was a court date. Court date kept getting delayed.
Adjourned, yeah.
Finally, we get to court. And he's there. I'm there. He's 10 meters away from me. And the charges of this: stalking for finding out where he lived. Harassment for the times I'd messaged him, asking him to meet me. And assault for leaving a red mark on his chest when I pushed the door open and it hit him.
I mean, I'm really angry that you were ever in that situation, as I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
But from someone who's gone through what you've gone through, to go through that level of abuse and trauma, to then have to face him in that way is the most shocking and awful thing that I can ever imagine for you.
It's the craziest thing. It's the craziest thing. But to see him crumble in the dock.
Yeah.
As the questioning started, can you please confirm why Jeremy was at your door? I don't want to talk about that.
Oh, no, I bet you bloody well don't.
Because you can't answer that question, can you? Now, my barrister said to me, we are not here to try to bring up what's already been investigated and closed.
Yeah.
Right? We're here for a different situation.
Yeah.
We're here because you knocked on the door and kept going.
It's very black and white in that, isn't it? Yeah.
But that question needed to be answered.
Yeah.
But he couldn't answer it. Now, the court day lasted the whole day. It was a whole day trial. Magistrates. I was found guilty for the assault, not guilty for stalking and harassment. Thank goodness, because I was looking at 6 months in prison.
Oh my God.
They're two crimes that are taken very serious. Yeah. So the court day's over. I walk out of there just feeling so powerful. Like, that is, if you want to close a case, right, on the person that exploited you when you were a child sexually for their sexual fantasy.
Yeah.
That was a good finish line for me.
Yeah.
I'd done everything that I possibly could.
Yeah.
We still have the problem.
Yeah.
Right? We still have the bigger problem, no doubt about it. But in that moment, I could take my piece.
Yeah.
Okay. So I continue working online. I start making films, animations, photography. Get to 10,000 followers. I decided to kick off a movement called Something to Say, giving other people the space to speak, which is what we started with. Now, I've got massive dreams for all of this work because I want to do it in the most unique way that I can possibly find. I've recently, starting from last year, managed to break into schools. This is a big, big aim of mine, but it brings big trouble. There's huge resistance to this. Huge resistance. Now, what I don't want to do is replicate the safeguarding training that they're already having. What I don't want to do is have a slide up with 4 types of abuse.
No way.
I mean, 7 signs to look out for.
Yeah, forget that.
I'd be bored writing it.
Yeah, me too. And to be honest, it doesn't change anything.
I've had to sit in 2 safeguarding courses this year, driven by somebody calling me out on social media saying, warning, this guy's got no safeguarding, don't bring him into your school.
What?
Somebody from an abuse prevention charity. You can't believe it, can you? You can't believe it.
No, I can't believe it. I cannot believe it.
I wrote a post replying to that person. I didn't name that person, but saying what I said. And my wife saw it and said, pull it down. That's the only time I've ever pulled a post down, because she said, don't react to those people.
Yeah.
You've reacted with anger, right? That is not a productive post. Don't let them win like that. It's weak.
Yeah.
And that hurt me, but it was the right advice from her.
Yeah.
I pulled it down and I wrote another post, which was, I wouldn't have done that safeguarding training because I probably do need it. I just don't need the colleagues like on my team. We're all on the same team.
Well, you would think so.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't call me out on social media like that.
Makes you question someone's motives though, because then it's all about who's got the bigger title.
Right. You know, I really found it truly distasteful.
Very.
So I have sat through safeguarding training. I see what that's about, and I'm so pleased that teachers are having it every year. But I wanted to try to do something different. So last week I spoke at primary school to teachers. I do half an hour storytelling where I talk through my story. It grips them, and it's a not stereotypical story.
Yeah.
I didn't show any signs, is the big thing.
Yeah.
And then I start talking about some other things and try to leave them feeling confident on a way forward. Now you should see the few times that I've got in front of these students, you should see them. They can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
When I'm telling this story, they're like so hooked into the storyline.
Yeah.
Then I finish with a quick 10 minutes of what you can do if you've ever gone through anything like this before.
Yeah.
And I want to leave with all those boys and those girls, teenagers and children. I go from year 7 and above, right?
Yes.
To feel like if that's happened to them and they've never felt like they could speak out, now's the time they can.
Yeah.
And if they ever come across that situation, it's all good to speak out. And just to see someone who's been through shit and has still lived a successful life with friends, a successful career, and is now talking about it openly, I think is a valuable lesson for young people.
I would have loved that when I was going through what I was going through. I would have loved to have seen someone and to know that there was something I could do.
So why don't the schools think like this?
Because it's all to do with red tape. And unfortunately, if you look at the tick boxes and the red tape in the education system overall, which is I'm banging the same drum because I say it on every episode. The education system fails, and I don't just mean what's being taught, I mean the entire system on almost every single level. There is some, obviously we need an education system. I'm not off the Richter scale here, but it's archaic. It hasn't moved on since 1928, if not before. The safeguarding is a tick box exercise because they have to.
Right.
I'm not saying the teachers are at fault for this, by the way. I am saying systems.
Yes.
Governments.
Yep.
It does make me wonder, what are we actually trying to achieve here, guys? You know, what is this all about?
Yeah.
Because it is not about the safety of the child, because you're failing on every level. You only have to look at most secondary schools in most towns to see how those kids are being failed, whether it be that they're neurodivergent and they're not getting the support they need because they don't have the piece of paper yet, because the waiting list to get a statement is so bloody long and so hard and so stressful that most people don't want to go through that system.
Right.
So they don't get the piece of paper, so they're labelled naughty and put into isolation all day long. That's the first problem. The second problem is what they're being taught doesn't cover the diversity in this country anymore, and it certainly doesn't teach us how to do our taxes and how to look after ourselves properly financially. And then when it comes to safeguarding, they haven't got a clue what they're looking at. This conversation today proves that. Not every child falls into the average safeguarding box. Yes, we need a base layer, but we also need to bring into the more into the eyes of the teachers and the students the more complex side of this, and not make it just a tick box exercise.
But they still won't bring me in.
I know.
Let's say I've done coming up to 15 schools now. I think students 3 times. It's gone phenomenally well.
I'm not
every
surprised.
single time.
Yeah.
Teachers are like telling me that they've never ever been so engaged into a presentation on this topic.
Well, kudos to you.
But I still can't get the bookings. I was meant to be speaking in 2 weeks into a boys' school, 1,000 students from year 7 to 12.
Yeah.
The teacher who had heard me speak at another event was like, "You're perfect."
Yeah.
She booked me and then she cancelled. And I think it's got to be something to do with internal politics,
Yeah.
parents' backlash,
Yeah.
or they're worried about triggers.
Because if 1 in 4, that's the I
Oh
said
my
earlier,
goodness. Can you imagine?
1,000 kids. I said earlier, I don't like the statistics because I don't think they're accurate. I think it's actually more than that.
Yeah.
But if we go with the 1 in 4,
Yeah.
imagine how
Yeah.
much of it, you see, this
Right.
is why they haven't got, this is what I was saying before, they haven't got the systems to cope with it because no one's looking at it properly. They're tick boxes.
So
no one's
crazy.
looking at it
So
properly.
crazy. It's so crazy. But I will continue. I'll
Yes.
continue pushing. I'm relying on word of mouth from every event that I
Yeah.
speak at. The primary school that I just spoke at in Kent,
Yeah.
they're like, "We are going to tell every school in our trust about
That's
you."
an amazing school.
And I'll continue building
Yeah.
with a goal of one day renting theatre halls and
Yes.
turning this into like a stand-up show.
Yeah.
Obviously not comedy,
Yeah.
but a man and a mic
Yeah.
talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And then people can buy tickets and come to it.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate goal.
Well, we spoke off camera about the ideas that I've got and how
Yes.
I 1,000,000%
Yeah.
think you would be an amazing, more than amazing. I can't even think of the right word right now, but it is game changing.
Yeah.
It is, what you're doing is game changing, and I think that the schools are restricted by that fear. 1 in 4. Oh my God! Can you imagine what we get? A can of worms. That's what they'll think.
Yeah. Or who's going to be upset after he speaks?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to take it?
Yeah.
When I'm like, come on, look at the films they watch, the music lyrics they listen
Have
to.
you seen
Come
what they've got
on.
access to?
Do you know what I mean? Like back in the day, to get to a film that was graded 15 or 18, you used to have to get in the cinema.
Yeah, that's right.
Now it's just all available.
But don't forget the pornography.
And
these
the pornography.
Guys. These
I mean,
kids, if you've got a brother, say you've got, a mother's got 3 kids and the oldest brother is 18. Do you think the 11-year-old hasn't seen porn yet? It's in their hands. So if these conversations aren't happening, you're literally adding to the problem.
And also, if you want to speak to students, the students in your school,
Yeah.
about knife crime,
Yes.
about addiction to drugs,
Yeah.
right, about gang culture,
Yeah, you definitely
about
need to be
pornography,
including this.
right, you need to bring in somebody who's had life experience
Yes,
of that
you do.
thing.
You do.
You need to bring in somebody who's stabbed and been to prison.
Yes.
You need to bring in somebody who's been addicted to A-class drugs and is coming and talking about the recovery.
Because they can relate
Right.
to the kid. Because they know that
Right.
child. Because they've been that child.
Not the teacher talking about it in a classroom
Yeah.
environment.
No, you're
so we
right.
agree with that. And every
Yeah.
parent and teacher would agree with that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sexual abuse,
It's a different story.
why?
I know.
Why?
I know.
It shouldn't be.
I know. You and I couldn't agree more.
I just want to come in and tell an inspirational story and have those kids on the edge of their seat.
Yeah.
But you won't let me.
And they'll relate to you.
I will leave them all with something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we keep pushing forward. The Something to Say organisation, I want to grow that. We have the clothing launched off it, and to see people send in pictures of them wearing it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I've got the Patreon that we've just launched with membership access. We've got the YouTube channel. We've now got a podcast on that side. I also have the Jeremy Indika stuff which is my pursuit, right? Bringing on experts onto my podcast, the Jeremy Indika podcast, to explore
Which
this
is
topic
phenomenal.
more. So you've got...
You like the Louis Theroux of this area.
I've just been watching his documentaries,
I love
actually.
Louis Theroux. Louis Theroux, if you're watching, will you please come on my podcast?
So I'm really going for it, and I believe it's truly possible. I truly believe like we've got incredible stories and we can achieve anything that we set our mind to.
I so believe that. Like, I've literally fallen in love with you today.
Amazing.
Everything you do and everything you say resonates so deeply. I'm so passionate about what you're doing, and I'm determined that everybody that listens to this goes to your pages, sees how they can help, and how if someone says, because I know you have volunteers and people that are really passionate about what you're doing, if someone does want to get involved or help, how can they do that?
So you can contact me at jeremyindika.com. we have a set of volunteers, and we're always looking for more people who are passionate and motivated about learning and helping us with the various tasks. Now, also, of course, we've got running costs too, right? So you can donate at jeremyindika.com too. The merchandise, which helps, is there too. We've also got something to say official.com. But we're available on all social media platforms too. We run all of them, which is time consuming.
Very.
So under Jeremy Indika and something to say official, come and join the journey, right? Because I say when we have team meetings, we are going to create something that in 10 years time, we're going to be look at what we managed to achieve.
Yes.
Look at what we
I
managed
agree.
to achieve.
And I don't think it's going to be 10 years before when you're saying that. I think it's going to be sooner. Because you are picking up momentum and you're doing so much work in this space. I've got some ideas fizzing away as we speak, which I'm not going to say in here. But like today for me, I love doing this, by the way. I love doing the podcast. But today for me has been talking to somebody that's had a similar experience to me, that's got the same drivers and the same passion, but you're specifically working in that area. Well, I work broadly with lots of different people. And it's nice to see the mirror image. It's nice to see somebody who is literally as excited. And we were talking before about the hours that we both put in, and sometimes it's a bit of a slog. But I said to you, didn't I? I said, I feel so passionate and purposeful that I don't feel the level of burnout that you would in a different career.
Yes.
And after talking to you today, I just feel there's so much light in me right now from sitting and talking to you. And I hope the people that are listening feel that too.
Yeah, me too.
Because there's a lot of light, there's a lot of power, there's a lot of strength, there's a lot of courage, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of all of those good things. You are all of those good things. And I know that there's going to be lots of people inspired and motivated from listening.
Thank you.
But I want to thank you personally for being somebody else that's doing the work. Because I know that what we haven't touched on is, for me personally, there has definitely been a lot of trauma responses and a lot of dark days. And you mentioned the dark days there. And I know that those dark days will have been there and still are sometimes, no doubt. So as much as I know that you're doing a lot of work, I know that sometimes you're going to have your own moments where you need to sort of disappear for a bit and recharge. So thank you for putting so much into it. And thank you for being here. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing you and everything you do. And I can't wait to see what is ahead of you, not just for you personally, but hopefully with me as well.
Yes, amazing. And thank you for providing this platform. And I really appreciate the invite, and what an incredible conversation we've had.
Yeah, I know. I'm buzzing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow.